The first card we're going to make is this one here, and we're going to use some dye-based markers to create the background, but first we're going to need to stamp and emboss the image on the card. Let's move this out of the way here. So I've got a watermark ink pad. So this is an ink pad that has some sticky ink that is going to stay sticky for a little while we do our embossing on our card base. And because we are using lots of water for creating these backgrounds, I'm doing this all on watercolor paper for my image pieces. Regular cardstock does not do well with water, so it's not recommended in any way, shape, or form for doing backgrounds that have lots of water on them. You could use like a mixed media paper, that one will be okay for water, but I chose to use some watercolor paper for today. Let's get our powder here, and I'm embossing it with white. If you emboss it with clear, sometimes the water and the ink kind of seeps under that embossing and it has a completely different look. So I've chose to do white so that I have a crisp white flower image on the card. I'm using a heat gun here. This emits heat. It doesn't really blow air, so it's going to melt that powder where it's stuck to the stamped image. A little bit harder to tell with the white paper on white, or white powder on white paper, but it goes from being like a white granular to a smooth glossy white image while you're melting it. So now I'm going to stamp and emboss my verse. You could do your background and then do the stamping and embossing afterwards, but by doing the stamping and embossing ahead of time, you can choose what colors you want behind different areas. It gives you a little bit more options. Now, saying that, the ink is going to flow and move around once we add the water to it, but it is nice to have a little bit of control over what color is going to go where. Now let's melt that one. If you happen to have any powder stuck outside of your stamped image, you do want to brush it off before you melt it. Once it's melted, you can't take it off. Just noticed a few pieces on my flowers were not totally melted. There we go. All right, so now we've got our watercolor paper embossed there. We're going to take our markers and we're going to color it. Now, you're not trying to be careful with this. This is just to get some color on your background. And like I said before, it's not going to stay where we put it. So it's going to move around a little bit. So you do not in any way need to be precise with this. Let's put some more over here. And as you can see, I'm not concerned with getting the background completely covered. I'm just trying to get all areas to have some in it. And I'm trying to put each of the colors in several different places. I don't want just like one blotch of red and one blotch of purple, blah, blah, blah. And you can do whatever colors you want. I chose these colors because they coordinate with the other cards that are in this class. But you don't have to go with these colors in any way, shape, or form. And the markers that I'm using are Tombow markers, but any dye-based marker that reacts to water will work. So now we need a spray bottle and we're going to spray it. as much or as little water as you want. I just want to make sure that there's a good amount of water so that that ink starts to move around and blend with each other. I don't, in general, tend to move the cardstock very much. I pretty much spray it and leave it to move, to blend and stuff like that. If you wanted to, you could lift and tilt to move it where you want it to go, but I kind of like seeing what it does and where it flows to. If you happen to have an area that's really, really dark that you don't like at all, the best way to get rid of it is take a corner of a paper towel and just place it on there, and it will suck all the excess out there. So I'm going to leave that to completely dry. You could take a heat tool, not the embossing gun, because we don't want the heat from it. We're just wanting something that's going to lightly and gently dry the ink. So you could do that to speed up the ink drying. I'm going to let it dry completely naturally. So it will take a while depending on how much water you've added.